There is a particular kind of fear that doesn't look like fear at all. It looks like busyness. It looks like independence. It looks like someone who is warm right up until the moment closeness might actually be possible, and then, quietly, becomes unreachable. Not because they don't want love, but because somewhere inside them, love and danger were once taught to mean the same thing. This is the story of that confusion, and what it takes to slowly untangle it. The pull toward and away there is a specific kind of ache that has no clean name. It is the ache of wanting someone closer, and simultaneously feeling the urge to step back the moment they arrive. Not because the person is wrong, not because the moment is wrong, but because closeness itself, at a certain distance, begins to feel like standing too near a fire, warm enough to want, hot enough to fear. This is often mistaken for indecision, for not really knowing what they want. But underneath, something more specific is happening. Longing and alarm are firing at the same time, in the same body, over the same person. The heart moves forward, the nervous system pulls back. And because both signals feel equally real, the result is not clarity, but a kind of internal static, wanting and dreading the same closeness in the same breath. It shows up in small, almost invisible ways. A message left unanswered for a day longer than necessary, not from disinterest, but from a sudden need for air. A conversation that turns light and joking exactly when it was becoming honest. A relationship that is allowed to deepen only up to a certain point, after which some quiet mechanism activates and begins, gently but persistently, to create distance. A new preoccupation, a sudden criticism, a retreat into independence, dressed up as busyness. Psychologists studying attachment describe this as an approach-avoidance conflict, a state in which the same stimulus, in this case closeness, is coded by the nervous system as both a reward to move toward and a threat to move away from. This is not a contradiction in character, it is two competing survival instructions, laid down at different points in life, both still active, both still believed. What makes this particularly disorienting is that it rarely feels like fear from the inside. It feels like preference. I just need space. I'm not really the relationship type. I do better on my own. These explanations are not lies. They are simply the surface language covering something older and less articulate. A body that has learned, at some point, that getting close to someone is the reliable precursor to getting hurt by them. And so the pattern repeats. Someone arrives, warm and promising. Closeness begins to build, tentative and real. And just as it starts to matter, the pulling away begins. Not always as abandonment, but often as a subtler withdrawal, emotional unavailability, a sudden focus on flaws, a preference for people who are, conveniently, less available in return. Each retreat feels, in the moment, like self-protection. Each one also confirms, quietly, the original belief. Closeness doesn't stay. It costs something. Better to leave first, or never fully arrive at all. The first time love hurt fear of closeness is rarely inherited from nowhere. It is built, layer by layer, from specific moments. Moments where closeness and pain arrived together, often enough that the nervous system began to expect them as a pair. For some, this begins in early childhood, in a relationship with a caregiver who was inconsistent, present and warm one day, distant or overwhelmed the next. Psychologist Mary Ainsworth, building on the work of John Bowlby, called this an anxious or disorganized attachment pattern, a relational template formed when the person a child depends on for safety is also, unpredictably, a source of confusion or fear. In this environment, the child's developing mind faces an impossible task. How do you safely attach to someone who is also unsafe to depend on? The nervous system resolves this contradiction the only way it can, by learning that closeness itself is inherently unstable, that love might arrive, but rarely stays reliable, and that vigilance must accompany affection at all times. For others, the wound arrives later, a first serious relationship where trust was extended fully and betrayed. A partner who left without warning, a confidence shared and later used as a weapon. A closeness that, once achieved, became the exact vulnerability through which the deepest harm arrived. In moments like these, the mind does not simply grieve the loss, it draws a conclusion, often unconsciously. This is what happens when you let someone all the way in. What makes these origins so powerful is not simply that pain occurred, but that it occurred at the precise moment closeness was at its peak. The nervous system is remarkably efficient at pattern matching. It does not require many repetitions to learn a rule, particularly when the pain involved was significant. Once learned, the rule generalizes. Not just that person hurt me, but closeness precedes hurt, applied broadly to future intimacy, often long after the original relationship has ended. This is compounded by a psychological phenomenon researchers call the trauma bond, or in gentler cases, simply the imprint of unresolved grief, a lingering association between vulnerability and danger that continues operating beneath conscious awareness. The person may consciously want connection, may actively seek it, and yet find their own body working against them at the very moment closeness becomes real, because some older part of them is still trying to prevent a repeat of the original injury. It is worth naming clearly, this is not weakness, nor overreaction. It is the nervous system doing precisely what it is designed to do, learning from pain in order to prevent its recurrence. The tragedy is only that the lesson, once learned, rarely knows how to update itself without deliberate, patient work, and so it continues protecting against a danger that, in many present relationships, may no longer actually be there. The biology of guarded hearts. Beneath the emotional experience of fearing closeness lies a coherent, well-documented psychological and physiological architecture, one that explains why intimacy can feel dangerous, even when, rationally, a person knows it shouldn't. Attachment theory offers the foundational framework here. Psychiatrist John Bowlby proposed that humans develop internal working models, largely unconscious templates, for what to expect from close relationships, based on early experiences with caregivers. When those early experiences involved inconsistency, intrusion, or harm, the resulting internal model often encodes closeness itself as inherently risky. Later researchers, including Amir Levine and Rachel Heller, in their work on adult attachment, describe how this can manifest as an avoidant or fearful avoidant style in adulthood, a pattern marked by genuine desire for connection, paired with an equally genuine, often stronger, instinct to deactivate that desire the moment it becomes achievable. Deactivation is a key concept here. It refers to a set of unconscious strategies: emotional distancing, fault-finding, sudden disinterest, hyper-independence, that the mind uses to reduce the intensity of an attachment before it becomes too threatening. Crucially, this is not a conscious decision. It is closer to a reflex, similar to flinching from unexpected heat, except the heat in question is emotional vulnerability itself. This has clear roots in the body's threat response system. Polyvagal theory, developed by researcher Stephen Porges, describes how the nervous system continuously scans the environment for cues of safety or danger, a process called neuroception, occurring beneath conscious thought. For someone whose early or formative experiences of closeness were entangled with pain, the neuroceptive system may begin registering intimacy itself as a danger cue, activating protective responses, withdrawal, shutdown, irritability, precisely when connection deepens, regardless of whether the present relationship poses any actual threat. This also intersects meaningfully with shame and self-protection. Psychologist Brené Brown's research on vulnerability describes how the willingness to be truly seen by another person is, neurologically and emotionally, one of the most exposing states a person can enter, which is precisely why it can feel so dangerous to those whose past experiences taught them that being fully seen led to being hurt. The instinct to withhold, to stay guarded, to keep one foot outside the relationship, functions as an attempt to control the degree of exposure and therefore the degree of potential pain. None of this means the fear is irrational. It means it is outdated. A highly sophisticated protective system, once necessary, still running its original programming in a present that may no longer require it. Letting someone stay change, in this pattern, rarely begins with a decision to trust. It begins, instead, with an accumulation of small, disconfirming experiences. moments where the expected consequence of closeness simply does not arrive. Perhaps it is a partner who notices the withdrawal and, instead of retaliating or leaving, gently asks what happened. Perhaps it is a moment of real vulnerability, admitting fear, admitting need, admitting the wish to pull away, met not with rejection, but with patience. Perhaps it is simply time passing inside a relationship that continues to hold steady, week after week, without the anticipated rupture. Each of these moments functions as a small correction to an old internal model. The nervous system, having learned through experience that closeness leads to harm, requires new experience, not argument, not reassurance alone, to begin revising that expectation. This is sometimes described in therapeutic work as a corrective emotional experience, a moment where an old relational wound is met with a new, different response, allowing the underlying belief to be challenged, not intellectually, but somatically, in real time. This process is rarely smooth. Often, the instinct to create distance will activate precisely when things are going well. A seemingly contradictory response, but a deeply logical one from the perspective of the old protective system, which has learned that comfort and closeness are exactly the conditions under which pain has previously arrived. Sabotage, in this light, is not self-destruction. It is premature self-protection, an attempt to control the ending before it can be inflicted unexpectedly again. Healing, then, often looks less like grand declarations of trust and more like small, repeated acts of staying in the conversation instead of deflecting it, staying present during a moment of real intimacy instead of finding a reason to leave the room, naming the fear out loud. Part of me wants to pull away right now, and I don't fully know why, rather than acting on it silently. Each of these moments, however small, becomes evidence. Evidence that vulnerability, this time, did not lead to the expected wound. Evidence that this person, this relationship, might be different from the templates written long ago. Over time, and only with enough repetition, the nervous system begins to update its forecast, not by force, but by the slow accumulation of proof that closeness, in this particular life, in these particular relationships, can be followed by safety rather than harm. The safety on the other side of fear. The fear of closeness was never proof of an inability to love. It was proof of having loved once, deeply enough that its loss or its danger left a lasting imprint. A nervous system doing exactly what nervous systems are built to do, remembering pain, in order to prevent its return. This fear does not deserve shame. It deserves recognition, as an old protector, not a personal flaw. It stood guard during a time when guarding was necessary. It kept a vulnerable heart from being reopened to a wound it did not yet have the resources to survive. In this light, the guardedness was never the opposite of love. It was, in its own complicated way, an act of self-preservation born directly out of love's earlier cost. But protectors, however loyal, are not always aware when the danger has passed. Part of this journey, then, is not banishing the guard, but gently informing it, through new experience, through patient repetition, through relationships that hold steady where old ones broke, that the present is not identical to the past. Somewhere beneath the caution, the deactivating instinct, the quiet urge to pull away just as things deepen, is someone who still, despite everything, wants to be close to another person without needing to brace for impact. That wish was never extinguished. It was only ever waiting, the way anything real tends to wait, for enough evidence, enough safety, and enough patience to finally believe that this time, closeness might be allowed to stay.